families and friends coming together to help is really what it's all about. Because this is how things happen. We can do what we can do as physicians and as scientists, but it takes the community to come together and help support the science. It wouldn't happen without an event like this. So I just want to start out by saying that. Thank you all for being here, because this is what's really going to help Ben. So, first met Ben a year ago, so a little year ago, and it's been an amazing journey. So, Ben was diagnosed with this incredibly rare disease that there are probably fewer than 10 kids in the United States with this disease. It might be underdiagnosed, there might be more, but we know of a small handful. And because it's so rare, there's really nothing much being done with it. There's no treatment being developed. There's no drugs that we can give to him to try to help him. So we kind of came up with this concept about seeing what we can do. When we couldn't find anything, what can we do ourselves to try to help Ben? So my very dear friend Steve, who actually recruited me here, we've worked together for years beforehand, but this was a really wonderful opportunity to really kind of cement the friendship and the collaboration. So I, as the clinician, reached out to the smarter guy, the neuroscientist, and said, hey, you gotta fix Ben. And we kind of came up with this concept of this Operation IDD Gene Team, where we have children like Ben with a rare disease that nobody's studying, and we kind of reach out to the Einstein community and say, anybody interested? Let's have everybody come together. Let's have the family meet the scientists, clinicians, everybody talk together, get to know each other, inspire each other, and then see what comes out of that.
Beautiful.
I'm going to turn over to him now.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you. So you heard from Jessica how this incredible coincidence that the way that I met the Folio family. And it happened at a time when Melissa and I had begun this program that she mentioned, where we try to build these teams of researchers, and again, I am a basic scientist, not a physician, but with researchers and clinicians and the families. And if the families are interested in hearing us talk about the disease as scientists and clinicians, and to sort of elaborate on what's known about it, then we make that happen. And that's what we did with Jessica and Mike. And Ben came actually that day as well. It was really, we held a meeting in the Rose F. Kennedy Center on the Einstein campus. And we've done this a half a dozen times now, but the meeting with the Folios was one of the very first. It was a bit over a year ago, in September, I guess, of August of last year. And it went remarkably well. And so when we, in this case, in terms of recruiting a scientist interested in this particular disease, it wasn't hard for me to do, because Salla disease is a lysosomal disease. And I study lysosomal diseases. Niemann-Pick C disease that Jessica mentioned earlier, that our friend had, that his son has, is a lysosomal disease. Tay-Sachs disease is a lysosomal disease. And Salla disease is a lysosomal disease, but it is one of the least known and least studied, least recognized of these diseases. As I mentioned to Jessica and Mike when we were in that tutorial, that when I did the chapter in Greenfield's Neuropathology on lysosomal diseases, Salla disease was in this category called other. All the rest of the 60 known lysosomal diseases sort of fit into these major subcategories, and most of them have foundations that support research, like the National Tay-Sachs and Allied Diseases Foundation. Some of you may be familiar with that. And there's a National Organization for Mucopolysaccharide Storage Diseases, and on and on. But for Salla disease, there was nothing. Melissa and I had been scurrying through the internet and elsewhere, trying to find not only a foundation, but scientists or clinicians still working on it. We even went back, searched our colleagues in Finland, where this disease was originally described, and could find no one who was actively working on the disease. And, you know, I mentioned all of this to Jessica and Mike, and Jessica, I remember so well what your response was to me during that tutorial. Again, this is like the September of 2017. You said, what I suggested was, maybe you would like to start a foundation or do something like that. And you said in the most honest and totally understandable way, I just can't do that now. I just want to take care of Ben, which is, of course, what you needed to be doing. And then about 6 weeks later, you contacted me and you said, I've changed my mind. I'm going to start a foundation. And you did that. And the ball started rolling. And, we've done, like I mentioned, about a half dozen of these tutorials, but none of them have done and blossomed like this one has in terms of what the families have been able to do. Not only was the foundation created, but somewhere along the way, between Melissa and I and the Folios, we got this idea of, well, since the disease is so little studied, let's pull together the scientists in the world that know something about it. So again, Melissa and I went searching through the literature and through our colleagues for individuals that we thought might know something about Salla disease. And we identified about a dozen people, some from the US and some from Europe. Actually, only one from Europe in the end was actively involved and came. And we had a meeting in Tarrytown in September of this year, just a year after all of this started with that tutorial. And we got the scientists together. We did this one-day, really intense sharing of ideas and knowledge about this disease and enthusiasm. It was really remarkable how you pull the scientists together and they really will share and talk and conceptualize ways to move forward and so forth. And one of the people at this meeting was this guy, William Gall, that Jessica mentioned. I've known Bill for a number of years, and I knew he would be, if we could get him to this meeting, it would be really important because a number of years ago, he had developed a therapy for another lysosomal disease known as cystinosis. And cystinosis is about as close to Salla disease as you can get in this spectrum of 60 lysosomal diseases. And so if Bill's lab could come up with a therapy for this other lysosomal disease that has some first cousin similarities to Salla disease, maybe we could get him focused on Salla disease as well. And he came, he brought some of his colleagues from NIH, and long story short, he's totally into doing this. And so the beauty of what Jessica described in terms of raising funds to support a postdoctoral fellow at NIH, the beauty of that is when that person is identified and is positioned in Bill Gall's lab, that person will have access to not only Bill's lab, but all of the NIH and the incredible resources that are there. So one of the first tasks this individual will have will be to make a mouse that has the exact mutation that Ben has, because Ben has the most common original Finnish mutation. It's the in terms of developing an animal model that you can work with in terms of testing therapies and so forth. It's really the perfect way to go forward. Right now, the only mouse model of this disease is a complete knockout of the gene, and it's just doesn't replicate the disease that we know occurs in children as well. And so that'll be the first task. NIH has incredible resources for making these kinds of models, and then for exploring other therapies, everything from gene therapy to small molecule therapy. If it's not in Bill's lab, it's in the lab down the hall, and so this is like it's like an opportunity that has all of these fantastic add-ons. And Jessica, you get that just for the price of the postdoc. You don't have to pay for all the other stuff because it'll all be happening within NIH and within Bill's lab. So and so that's, a large part of the basis for getting all of you here tonight. It's so wonderful that you're all here, and it really is as incredible an opportunity to advance research and understanding and potentially developing a therapy for an ultra-orphan rare disease as we'll ever have. And so really applaud you for being here, and I hope you can be supportive of that process.